In the small village of Ijokodo, nestled between large green hills and flowing rivers, lived a woman named Aduni. She was married to Adewale, a hard-working and loving man. The couple lived modestly, relying on Adewale's job as a mechanic to get by. Despite their financial struggles, they shared an unbreakable bond forged by love and mutual respect. Their home was simple but filled with warmth and laughter. Aduni spent her days tending to their modest garden and helping neighbors with chores, while Adewale worked tirelessly at the mechanic shop. In the evenings, they would sit together, sharing stories and dreams under the starry sky. Their love was a beacon of hope in the village, a testament to the strength of their commitment to each other. One fateful evening, Adewale was working late at the shop. He was known for his dedication and often took on extra work to make ends meet. But this evening was different. As he was finishing up a repair, he suddenly collapsed. His colleagues, alarmed, rushed to his aid. They quickly transported him to the nearest hospital, hoping to save their friend. Aduni was at home when she received the urgent call. She hurried to the hospital, her heart pounding with fear. When she arrived, she found Adewale pale and barely conscious. The doctors informed her that Adewale was suffering from a rare and severe condition that required immediate and expensive treatment. The cost was far beyond what they could afford. Adoni felt a wave of despair wash over her. She held Adewale's hand, tears streaming down her face. "We will find a way," she whispered to him, trying to sound confident. But deep down, she knew their options were limited. The village was small, and their savings were meager. The burden of finding a solution weighed heavily on her shoulders. Determined to save her husband, Aduni turned to Adewale's friends for help. These were men who had shared laughter and drinks with him, men who had always spoken highly of his character. She believed they would not turn their backs on him in his time of need. Little did she know, her faith in them would soon be shattered. The first person Aduni approached was Alao, a wealthy businessman who had always seemed like a brother to Adewale. She explained the situation, her eyes pleading for mercy. Alao listened, but when she finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You know I would have loved to help Adewale," he began, "but money is tight these days. Perhaps there are other ways you could convince me. You know, I've been longing to have you in my bed. Just say yes to one night with me, and I will give you any amount you want." Aduni recoiled as Alao's meaning became clear. Disgusted and heartbroken, she left without another word. Her hope was dwindling, but she knew she had to keep trying. She couldn't give up on Adewale. Next, Aduni sought out Olumide, a successful lawyer and another close friend of Adewale's. Her hope was renewed, thinking surely Olumide would be different. She explained her dire situation, her voice filled with desperation. But when she laid out her plea, his response mirrored Alao's. "Money is hard to come by," he said, "but for you, I'm sure we can come up with an arrangement. Let me enter your paradise, and I will give you the world if you ask for it." Aduni left his house disappointed and heartbroken. Each rejection was like a dagger to her heart. Her desperation grew as each man she approached demanded the same price for their help. In her grief and rage, she rejected them all, unable to betray her love for Adewale, even to save his life. As Adewale's condition worsened, Aduni stayed by his side, holding his hand and praying for a miracle. But despite her efforts, within days, he passed away, leaving Aduni devastated and alone. The loss of her husband was a blow she was not prepared to bear. At his funeral, the same friends who had denied him aid came to pay their respects, offering condolences that did nothing to soothe her pain. The hypocrites fueled a burning anger within her. She stood by his grave, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. Their insincere words only intensified her grief. As if the death of her husband was not a heavy enough burden, She was accused of killing him by some of her late husband's brothers, who had been longing to have her warm their beds. They took everything her husband left for her and told her she could come back for them if only she agreed to sleep with them. Aduni chose to leave the properties for them and tried making a living for herself by selling in the village market. But she couldn't sell anything because of the accusations leveled against her by her brothers in law. She was left penniless, broken, and depressed. Then one day, as she sat alone in her dark room, sad and frustrated, she remembered her friend Fonke, who lived in the city. Aduni decided to reach out for help. She put a call to Fonke, explaining all she had been going through since her husband's demise. Fonke listened with empathy and invited Aduni to the city. When Aduni arrived at Fonke's house, she was surprised to see her friend, a widow like her, living in such affluence. Her home was beautiful, and she had chains of businesses, cars, jewelry, and more. She questioned how Funke had acquired such wealth without a husband by her side. Funke laughed and told her how she also faced the same ordeal when she lost her husband, but she had to take matters into her own hands and help herself. After listening to Funke's story, Aduni's anger rekindled, and a desire for vengeance consumed her every thought. She told Funke she was willing to do anything to get back at her brothers in law and her husband's mean friends. Funke told Aduni to get ready because she would be taking her to a place where she could get help. The next day, Funke took Aduni to a very powerful water priestess named Yemoja. The priestess's house was located very close to the bank of a river. When Yemoja saw them, she welcomed them and asked what brought them to her. Aduni began, her voice trembling with grief and fury. I need your help. The men who could have saved my husband demanded a price I could not pay. My late husband's brothers have taken everything from me, and to make matters worse, I can't even earn a living because everyone has ostracized me due to the allegations leveled against me. I want to make all those involved suffer just as I have suffered. Yemoja's eyes, sharp and knowing, peered into Aduni's. Vengeance is a dangerous path, my child. Once you start down it, there's no turning back, Yemoja said. I am ready, Aduni replied, her resolve unshaken. I will do whatever it takes. With a grave nod, Yemoja led Aduni into the depths of her hut, where the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and the whispers of ancient spirits. For days, Aduni underwent rituals inside the river that bound her to the dark forces she sought to control. She learned the ways to trap the fortunes of men within enchanted bottles, a power that would allow her to exact her revenge in the most fitting manner. Finally, an incision was made on her private part so that any man who slept with her would be enslaved for life. Yemoja went further to tell her that any man who lay with her would have all his riches and fortunes transferred to her. Yemoja taught her how to trap the men's aura into the enchanted bottles and also told her that whenever she had finished draining any man's aura, she should take the bottle to the nearest river, open it, and release him into the water. Transformed by her newfound abilities, Aduni returned to the village with cold determination. She began to weave her web, luring the very men who had once scorned her into her trap. She did not need to wait long. The same men who had lusted after her when she was vulnerable now fell easily into her clutches. Alao was the first. She went to his shop, pretending to be in desperate need of money. Immediately he saw her, he said, I knew hunger would bring you back to me. It is even good that your husband is dead now. I can have you all to myself. He laughed mischievously. They arranged to meet at her house that night. After he laid with her and slept, Aduni whispered an incantation over a small empty enchanted bottle, trapping his aura. When Alao woke up the next day, he found himself weak, but he left her house fulfilled. Just a few weeks after his encounter with Aduni, Alao's business ventures began to fail. his wealth slipping through his fingers. His once prosperous shops were now deserted, and his customers had vanished. Alao could not understand the sudden turn of events. Desperate, he tried to salvage his business, but his efforts were in vain. The more he struggled, the worse things became. Alao's reputation was tarnished, and he was soon reduced to a shadow of his former self. He could no longer afford the luxurious lifestyle he once enjoyed. The man who had once boasted of his wealth now found himself destitute and desperate. His fall from grace was swift and merciless, and he had no idea that it was all due to Aduni's dark power. Next was Olumide. Despite his legal acumen, he could not resist Aduni's charm. She visited his office pretending to seek legal advice. Olumide, always confident and self assured, welcomed her with open arms. They chatted, and soon Olumide found himself entranced by Aduni's beauty and grace. They arranged to meet at her house. That night, Olumide fell into her trap. After their encounter, Aduni whispered the incantation over an enchanted bottle, trapping his aura just as she had done with Alao. Olumide left her house, feeling victorious, unaware of the dark fate that awaited him. After the encounter, Olumide began to experience a series of misfortunes. His influential clients deserted him, and his once stellar reputation was tarnished overnight. Court cases he would have easily won began to slip through his fingers, and his legal career started to crumble. The more he tried to regain control, the more elusive success became. Olumide's wealth dwindled, and he found himself struggling to maintain his lavish lifestyle. His colleagues and friends turned their backs on him, and he was soon left isolated and disgraced. The man who had once been a pillar of the community was now reduced to a cautionary tale of hubris and downfall. One by one, the men who had betrayed Adewale and Aduni fell into ruin. Her brothers in law were not left out. They watched their fortunes crumble with cold satisfaction. Aduni's bottles of trapped fortunes grew in number, and with each new bottle, her power and wealth increased. Aduni became the richest and most powerful woman in Ijokodo. She built the biggest and most beautiful mansion in the village. Whenever she went to the market, she gave the women extra money, and people wondered how she managed to acquire such wealth in such a short period of time. They whispered among themselves, speculating about her newfound fortune. One cool evening, while Aduni was taking a stroll, she came across the prince. They exchanged pleasantries, and she went her way. But when the prince turned back and saw her heavily endowed backside, he couldn't resist it. He called her back and asked if he could visit her, and Aduni obliged. The next day he was in her mansion. They chatted, drank, and ate, and one thing led to another. They laid together, and the prince enjoyed every bit of it, because Aduni was skilled in the art. The next morning, as he was leaving her house, he said, "You are so sweet, just as your body looks. Please, when can I come again?" Aduni smiled and said, "I'll give you a call." But in her mind, she cursed him and said, "No, only call me again. You are now a living dead." That evening, as Aduni was relaxing in her sitting room, her phone rang. It was her mother, who had been down with a life threatening illness. "The sickness has worsened. I need to go for surgery. It will cost 10 million naira," her mother said. Aduni sighed and said, "Okay, I will send you the money." She got up from the chair and walked majestically into the hallway. She went into the incantation room and brought out the enchanted bottle containing the prince. Immediately she lifted the bottle. He was scared and jumping inside. She brought him out and chanted incantations. Immediately he started vomiting money. But when she counted the money, it wasn't enough. She needed more. What will be the end of Aduni? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Stay tuned for part 2. Kindly subscribe, like, comment, and share.